This took place years ago in a parched village in Texas. A young peddler lived with his wife and young son in a small house by the roadside. He had no land of his own, but he had the will and the hope that one day he could escape the debts that tormented him. Every morning he went out to work with empty pockets and a lowered head, dreaming of one day owning what was his, even if for now neither the son nor his debts gave him any rest. One morning he went to the village grocery store. It wasn't much to look at. An old shack painted with scraps of white paint. Through an open window, one could see sacks of flour, bundles of beans, sugar cubes, and cheap tobacco. It was the place where everyone went, and half the village was in debt there. He pushed the door open. The rusty hinge creaked like an accusing finger. All eyes turned toward him. The grocer, a heavy-set man with a flushed face and cold eyes, raised his voice like someone throwing a stone to break something. "Well, look who it is, the one who lives on credit." The sentence fell like a slap. Some let out dry laughs. Others looked down, feigning indifference. He felt the weight of every gaze burning the back of his neck. He swallowed. His throat was as dry as the earth. He stepped forward, shoulders hunched, toward the counter. "Good morning," he whispered. "Good evening to you," the grocer replied with a twisted smile. "To me, you are nothing but debt." The man pulled out his thick, grease-stained ledger. He opened it exactly to where the peddler's name was repeated over and over. Flour, coffee, sugar, cheap tobacco. Dates, figures, no story, just debt. "You didn't pay yesterday, nor the day before. Tell me when you're going to keep your word." "As soon as I'm paid this week," he whispered. "Promises." The grocer hit the counter. The sharp noise was like a whip crack. "Promises don't fill my register. If you don't pay today, tomorrow, everyone will know you aren't just poor, but a fraud." Outside, his wife listened to everything behind the cracked door. She didn't need to see. The shouts sank in like knives. Her hands trembled, not from cold, but from helplessness. It wasn't the first time, but this time it hurt more. The entire village was pushing him down. He felt a thick heat rising in his chest. He wanted to raise his head. He wanted to speak, but he couldn't. The words remained stuck like stones. He took the empty basket, turned around, and walked out into the sun. Murmurs followed him like flies. "There he goes again," a woman said. "He lives by asking for credit," an old man added, spitting into the dust. He continued walking on the dry path. Every step hurt, as if he had nails in his feet. The empty basket felt heavier than if it were full. He wasn't carrying food, he was carrying shame. When he arrived, his wife closed the door firmly and looked at him steadily. "I am tired," she said without shouting. "Tired of Owen, tired of bowing my head, tired of being pointed at like we are trash." "I am working," he whispered. "Yes, you work, but it's not enough. The little that comes in goes to pay what we already owe and to buy in advance what doesn't even exist yet." He lowered his eyes. He had no defense. "Do you know what hurts more than having no money?" she said. "It's being screamed at as if you were worthless. And having our son see that." He clenched his fists. In his mind echoed the grocer's dry laughter, the twisted looks, the dirty ledger. His life seemed written in those pages. That night he did not sleep. He sat by the window while the wind dragged dust like a mockery. His wife slept, his son too, but not him. Debt did not just empty his pockets, it emptied his soul. He looked at his calloused hands, worn by work, and there, in the middle of the darkness, he whispered, "I will never owe a single coin to anyone again, never." His wife heard him from the bed. She said nothing, but she recognized that voice. It wasn't the voice of a broken man. It was the voice of a man deciding to stand up. At dawn, the peddler did not drag his feet. He walked slowly but firmly. He had no money, but he had a decision. He took an old rusty shovel and went behind the house. He began to dig a small hole. The earth was hard, parched, as if it too were resisting. He sweated, his hands filled with dirt, but he did not stop. He dug as if with every shovelful he was burying the shame. He looked for a small rusty tin box. He didn't even have a coin to put in it, but he buried it anyway. It wasn't a hiding place. It was a promise. When payday came, the foreman, a tanned man with a shrewd look, said to him, "Do you want me to advance you 10 coins like usual?" The peddler took a deep breath. "No." "What do you mean, no?" "I don't want to owe any more." There were laughs. "This one has gone mad," said one. "We'll see how long that lasts," added another. But he didn't laugh. He continued sharpening his tool calmly. The following days were harder than before. No coffee in the morning, no tobacco in the evening. Food was scarce. The pot boiled empty, but the pain was different. It wasn't the misery of a slave, it was the struggle of a man. And that misery, though bitter, had dignity. To keep the grocer from harassing him, he did something that hurt like a blow. He pawned his only shoes, leaving them on the counter, clean but old. The grocer snatched them without pity. That night he walked barefoot on the rocky path, feeling every stone, every thorn. But he did not turn back. His wife looked at him in silence while their son slept on her arm. "If you are sure," she said, "I will follow you." "I am tired of owing," he replied. "I prefer to eat less, but keep my head high." Dry tears fell without a sound. They were not tears of defeat, but of one who knows that freedom has a price. Payday came again. He felt the crumpled paper envelope in his hand. Out of habit, his feet wanted to take him to the grocery store, but he gripped the money in his pocket and turned around. He walked barefoot to his house, took out the tin box, and dropped 3 coins and a bill inside. The sound was faint, but within him it resonated like a thunderclap. The grocer saw him pass and shouted mockingly, "Hey, debtor, did you bring something to pay today or what?" The peddler stopped. His feet were covered in dust, his face burnt, his hands hard. He walked up to the counter. "Here," he said, leaving his shovel wrapped in a sack. "Is this what you're giving me?" asked the grocer. "It's all I have," he replied. The grocer gave a dry laugh. Shoes, and now a shovel. What a way to pay! But that laugh no longer hurt him, because the man who used to enter bent over now walked out standing tall. And though he had no shoes, no shovel, and no luxuries, he had recovered the most expensive thing, his voice. Months passed, slow, silent, difficult. Every fortnight, when he received his pay, the first thing he did was not run to the store or look at what was missing at home. The first thing was to set aside a portion and save it. It wasn't much, a few coins, folded bills, but he did it with the firmness of someone who had decided to break a chain. The tin box, the very one that had been empty and rusty, began to have weight. Every coin that dropped inside rang softly, but in his chest it echoed like a drum. It wasn't just money. It was dignity preserved piece by piece. Temptation followed him like a shadow. He would pass the store. and the smell of hot coffee would wrap around him. The tobacco, the salted meat, the shiny bottles, everything whispered, "Just a little. No one will notice." But he did not yield. He knew what that pleasure cost: humiliation, debt, shame. He had learned something no one had taught him. To get out of debt, you must learn to say no. And the hardest person to say it to is yourself, in the mirror. Every fortnight, he repeated the same ritual. There were no rounds of applause or witnesses, just silence, sweat, and discipline. In a small village, even silence is noticed. The neighbors watched him with curiosity. One of them, an old peddler tired of owing, said to him one day, "What's the point of saving if we're going to die poor anyway?" The peddler replied without raising his voice, "It's so that even if I die poor, I don't die owing." One day, the grocer shouted at him again in front of everyone, but this time he didn't tremble. "Are you going to pay or not?" roared the heavy man behind the counter. The peddler reached into his shirt and pulled out the envelope he had been preparing for weeks. He placed it on the wood without hesitation. "Yes," he said, "but this will be the last time I owe you a cent." The grocer opened the envelope. The money was exact, neither more nor less. The entire store went silent. The customers watched him without mockery. No one said a word as the thin man walked through the door. It wasn't necessary. He walked with his head high. His silence was his cry. That night, in the small earth house, his wife hugged him. It wasn't a celebration hug, but one of relief. "We have paid everything," she said in a trembling voice. He replied, "We paid yesterday. Today we start living for real." From that day on, every cent had a destination, just enough food, a necessary tool, a portion set aside in the earth, nothing more, no loans, no favors, which are paid for in words and humiliation. In a village where everyone owed something, the one who owed nothing began to shine, even if he had nothing else. Over time, people noticed his change. He no longer asked for credit, no longer appeared on the grocer's list, no longer bowed his head. His clothes were still old and his house humble, but he walked straight. He had learned one of the hardest lessons. You don't need to earn more to live better. You need to stop owing, because debt doesn't just steal money. It steals your voice. It steals your time. It steals your dignity. 3 years passed without a miracle, without a stroke of luck, just work and silence. The tin box ceased to be just a box. It became a symbol. With the coins set aside one by one, he bought a plot of dry land at the edge of the village. Hard, poor land, but his, paid for without stained papers or foreign names. When he signed the deed before the notary, he felt he could breathe deeply for the first time in his life. His wife hugged him hard. She didn't say, "We made it." She said nothing. She simply rested her forehead on his shoulder, because there are victories that need no words. The grocer stayed at his counter, just as heavy, just as arrogant. But something had changed. He no longer had power over him. One dusty afternoon, he saw him pass and called out in a different tone, almost kind, "Hey, peddler, if you ever want credit to improve your little house, you know where I am." The peddler stopped. He looked him in the eyes. There was no hatred, just calm. "I don't need credit any more, sir," he said. "I pay with facts, and if I don't have it, I don't buy it." The grocer lowered his eyes. This man he once humiliated now had something he couldn't sell: dignity. The same neighbors who used to laugh at his refusal of advances began to visit him. They wanted to know how he did it, how someone without an education or an inheritance managed to get land without owing anyone. "There is no secret," he would say, sitting on the wooden bench under the porch. "I just stopped living as if tomorrow were forever." One of them murmured, "But it's hard. We always need something." The peddler looked at him steadily. "Don't confuse need with habit. Need is eating. Habit is spending what you don't have." The words hung in the warm air. No one answered, but everyone understood. Every dawn, the peddler walked on his land. It wasn't fertile. It had no irrigation or shiny fences, but it was his. He planted just enough, harvested just enough, but most importantly, he owed nothing to anyone. No one called to harass him. No one could put an invisible leash around his neck. He was a poor man, yes, but with a straight back and a heart at peace. And in that village, that was worth more than a painted house or a new hat. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, he sat with his wife on the porch. She was sewing in silence. He looked at his dry plot. "Do you remember when they used to scream at us at the store?" he said. "Yes," she replied. "Never again," he said, pressing the earth with his boot. Because when a man learns not to owe, the world stops holding the leash to his neck. She smiled. It was a smile without luxury, but full of victory. The next morning, a young companion arrived at his house at dawn. He had the same tired look the peddler had years before, empty of money, empty of direction. "What should I do?" the young man asked. The peddler looked at him without false compassion, without a long speech. "Start by saying no. No to the advance, no to credit, no to spending what doesn't exist yet, no to living as the slave of an open account." The young man lowered his head. He didn't answer, but something changed in his face, for there are words that make no noise but germinate slowly. That night, with the wind hitting the cracks of the house, the peddler remembered it all. The humiliation, the rage, the buried box. The first coins, the last debt paid. No one had given him anything. No one had saved him. He had done it himself by learning to owe no one. And in a world where almost everyone runs after what they don't have, he had found an invisible treasure, the peace of not owing. Debt doesn't start with a piece of paper, he thought. It starts with a habit. Every time you spend what you don't have, you give away a piece of your freedom. It's not the store. It's not the bank. It's you who change yourself. Freedom is not having a lot. Freedom is that no one can take anything away from you because you owe nothing. Dear friends, I am very happy that you made it to the end of this video. Comment the phrase, "I am free," and don't forget to subscribe to the channel, Stories with Deep Messages, for more stories. And remember, there are more stories on your screen. Thank you very much.